just when people thought the Duggar scandal couldn't become any more disturbing, another controversy suddenly exploded across the internet. This time, it wasn't a courtroom revelation. It wasn't a new investigation, and it wasn't another public statement from the family. It was the alleged existence of deeply personal letters reportedly exchanged between Anna Duggar and Josh Duggar during one of the darkest chapters in the family's history. And almost immediately, the internet went into meltdown. Because according to online discussions and reports, the letters didn't sound like what many people expected at all. Critics claimed parts of the messages felt unusually cheerful, strangely affectionate, even disconnected from the seriousness of the criminal case surrounding Josh Duggar. That reaction triggered an entirely new wave of backlash online. Some people accused Anna Duggar of living in complete denial. Others defended her, arguing that outsiders could never fully understand the emotional pressure, religious expectations, and family control happening behind closed doors. And within hours, social media exploded into a massive debate about loyalty, manipulation, faith, marriage, and the psychological impact of growing up inside an extremely controlled environment. Because for many viewers who had followed the Duggar family for years, this controversy seemed to raise an uncomfortable question. How does someone continue standing beside a partner while the entire public sees scandal, disgrace, and destruction? And maybe even more importantly, was Anna Duggar acting out of devotion, fear, religious conditioning, or something far more complicated? Tonight, we're breaking down the full controversy behind the alleged letters, why the online reaction became so intense, how the Duggar family's carefully crafted image completely collapsed, and why audiences remain obsessed with this story years later. For years, the 19 kids and counting family built an image around faith, traditional values, and strict conservative Christian living. Through hit reality shows like 19 Kids and Counting On, millions of viewers watched the family grow from a small Arkansas household into one of the most recognizable names in reality television. To longtime fans, the Duggars represented discipline, structure, and a carefully controlled version of family life that seemed very different from mainstream Hollywood culture. But behind the polished TV image, controversies were slowly building for years, and eventually, those scandals would completely reshape public perception of the family forever. Everything changed when the federal criminal case involving Josh Duggar exploded into national headlines. News coverage, courtroom updates, and nonstop online reactions dominated social media for months. Former viewers who once supported the family suddenly began re-examining old interviews, past episodes, and the culture surrounding the Duggar household itself. As the case unfolded, public attention increasingly shifted toward Anna Duggar, Josh's wife, and the controversial decision to continue standing beside him publicly despite overwhelming backlash online. For many critics, her loyalty became one of the most debated parts of the entire scandal. Then the controversy intensified even further. Online discussions and reports began circulating about deeply personal letters allegedly exchanged between the couple during one of the darkest periods in the family's history. While some supporters argued the messages reflected faith, commitment, and private marital communication, many critics interpreted the tone very differently. Certain internet users described the letters as strangely upbeat, emotionally disconnected, or detached from the seriousness of the situation unfolding around them. Others saw something more complicated. Across YouTube commentary channels, Reddit discussions, TikTok breakdowns, and true crime communities, many people began debating whether Anna's behavior reflected years of religious conditioning, emotional dependence, isolation from outside influences, or pressure from both family and church culture. The conversation quickly evolved beyond just one marriage scandal, becoming a larger debate about control, belief systems, loyalty, and the psychological impact of growing up inside highly restrictive environments. Regardless of where public opinion landed, one thing became undeniable. The Duggar story was no longer simply about reality television. What once looked like a carefully managed image of faith and family had transformed into one of the internet's most heavily discussed and controversial real-life scandals, and the discussion surrounding it still hasn't disappeared. As the Duggar family rose to fame on reality television, they were quickly positioned as the ultimate example of a modern, wholesome American household. Their show on 19 Kids and Counting introduced audiences to a lifestyle that felt almost entirely outside mainstream culture, centered on extreme family size, strict religious values, and carefully structured daily life. At the core of their public identity was a very deliberate brand, a conservative Christian family committed to traditional roles, modest living, and strong parental authority. Viewers were shown a world where children were homeschooled, courtship replaced dating, and personal decisions were heavily guided by religious beliefs. This wasn't just entertainment, it was presented as a lifestyle blueprint. Much of their media appeal came from curiosity. People were fascinated by the idea of raising a family with so many children under one roof, and how such a structured environment could function day to day. The Duggar household became a kind of cultural experiment on screen, drawing millions of viewers who tuned in to see how order, discipline, and faith shaped family life at scale. However, even in the early seasons, some critics began to raise concerns. Former viewers and outside observers pointed to what they saw as tightly controlled messaging. The family's public appearances felt highly managed, with consistent talking points and limited deviation from their core values. Questions were raised about how much of what audiences were seeing reflected reality, and how much was carefully curated for television. Their relationship rules also drew attention. The Duggar approach to courtship, which required strict parental oversight and limited physical or emotional independence before marriage, stood out even within conservative circles. While presented as a moral framework, critics argued it placed unusual restrictions on young adults' autonomy. Behind the scenes, media training and image control played a significant role in maintaining their public reputation. Interviews, appearances, and even personal stories seemed to follow a consistent narrative. Faith first, family unity second, and individuality carefully balanced within those boundaries. Over time, some former viewers began to question whether the family's public image allowed space for complexity, or only for perfection. As the show gained popularity on TLC, the contrast between admiration and skepticism grew sharper. What began as fascination with a large, structured family slowly evolved into broader debate about control, representation, and the difference between televised reality and private life. As the Duggar family's public image was still at its peak, attention increasingly shifted toward one of its most controversial figures, Josh Duggar. What began as a carefully managed reality TV narrative slowly unraveled as earlier allegations and past misconduct reports resurfaced in public discourse. Before the most widely reported legal case, Josh Duggar had already been linked to earlier scandals that triggered significant media backlash. These revelations created immediate tension between the family's public image of moral authority and the emerging details that contradicted it. The response at the time included public apologies and statements, but for many viewers, the damage to trust had already begun. As these controversies spread online, the impact on the Duggar family brand became increasingly visible. Their long-running presence on 19 Kids and Counting faced intense scrutiny, and eventually, the network and production partners began distancing themselves from the growing controversy. The fallout didn't just affect one show, it disrupted the entire reality TV ecosystem built around the family. Media coverage shifted dramatically during this period. What had once been framed as inspirational family content was now being reported primarily through the lens of scandal. Headlines focused less on daily life and more on accountability, allegations, and public response. The tone of coverage changed, and so did audience perception. Eventually, the original series was canceled, and a follow-up show, Counting On, also came under pressure as public trust continued to erode. Networks and sponsors became increasingly cautious, reflecting how quickly a reality TV brand can collapse under sustained controversy. online reaction was deeply divided. Some supporters emphasized forgiveness and separation between public actions and private repentance, while critics argued that earlier warning signs had been overlooked or minimized. Social media amplified both perspectives, turning the Duggar story into a prolonged cultural debate rather than a closed chapter. Inside the family dynamic, the impact was not limited to public reputation. The younger Duggar siblings, many of whom had grown up entirely within the reality TV framework, were suddenly faced with intense public scrutiny they did not choose. Their private lives became part of a much larger public conversation, adding pressure to an already complex situation. Over time, the combination of media scrutiny, public backlash, and institutional distancing led to a significant collapse in public trust. The Duggar name, once strongly associated with a polished image of faith and family values, became instead a symbol of how quickly that image can fracture under sustained controversy. Narration. As the legal process moved towards sentencing, online conversations shifted once again, this time focusing on alleged private letters reportedly exchanged between Anna Duggar and Josh Duggar. According to various online discussions and secondary reports, portions of these letters were interpreted by readers as unexpectedly casual in tone, especially given the seriousness of the criminal case surrounding Josh Duggar. Some viewers described the language as emotionally detached, while others saw it as a form of personal coping that outsiders may not fully understand. Once these interpretations began circulating, they quickly spread across social media platforms. Short clips, commentary videos, and discussion threads amplified selective excerpts and reactions, often removing broader context in the process. Critics of Anna Duggar's continued public support for Josh argued that the tone of the alleged correspondence suggested emotional denial or separation from the reality of the situation. In contrast, supporters and more cautious observers pushed back against those interpretations, emphasizing that private communication during traumatic legal circumstances is complex and often not fully visible to the public. As debate intensified, the situation became less about the content of the letters themselves and more about what they represented to different audiences: loyalty, denial, grief, or personal conviction. The word delusional began appearing frequently in online comment sections and reaction content, reflecting how emotionally charged and polarized the discussion had become. At the same time, other users criticized that framing, arguing it reduced a deeply personal and private situation into internet spectacle. Rapid spread of reaction videos and commentary clips. Viral headlines shaping public interpretation. Growing fascination with private correspondence in high-profile cases. Divided debate over loyalty, faith, and emotional boundaries. How tabloid-style coverage and social media amplification intensified the controversy. As the debates around Anna Duggar intensified online, the public conversation began to shift once again, this time away from opinion and back toward consequence. Josh Duggar's conviction and sentencing had already reshaped the Duggar family's public image permanently, but the ripple effects didn't stop in the courtroom. For Anna, the scrutiny only deepened. Every public appearance, every absence, and every perceived silence became material for discussion, analysis, and speculation across social media platforms. Some commentators framed her continued association with the situation as a reflection of deeply rooted belief systems that prioritize marital permanence above personal rupture. Others saw it as a difficult emotional reality shaped by years of isolation, dependency, and controlled environments. But as time passed, a new layer emerged in the public discourse: fatigue. What began as shock and outrage gradually turned into something more complicated. Confusion, empathy from some, frustration from others, and a growing realization that there were no simple answers. The story stopped being just about one family or one individual. It became a wider reflection on how belief systems, loyalty, and institutional pressure can intersect in ways that are difficult for outsiders to fully interpret. And in that uncertainty, the internet reached its final divide. Some people saw accountability, others saw constraint, and many saw a mix of both, existing uncomfortably side by side. Final narration. In the end, the Duggar scandal didn't just expose a legal case or a public downfall. It exposed a deeper question that still lingers in public debate today. How much of what we judge from the outside is actually shaped by forces we may never fully see from within? And for Anna Duggar, that question became the final weight of a story the world never stopped watching, but never fully agreed on how to understand. For more than a decade, the Duggar name functioned like a media brand built for reality television. Through shows like 19 Kids and Counting and later Counting On, the family was presented as a rare glimpse into a large, tightly structured, faith-centered household. At its peak, the brand was not just entertainment. It was a lifestyle image that attracted loyal viewers and consistent network support. But as controversies surrounding Josh Duggar intensified and legal issues became public, that carefully built image began to collapse under sustained scrutiny. What once felt like wholesome, predictable programming quickly became unviable for mainstream television networks. Collapse of the media empire. As public controversy grew, the Duggar family's television presence effectively ended. Networks stepped back from further productions, and planned or ongoing projects were discontinued. The once regular presence on cable television disappeared almost entirely, leaving a void where a long-running franchise had been. What replaced it was not a new show, but a fragmented public narrative spread across interviews, news coverage, and independent commentary channels. Loss of sponsorships and TV opportunities. With reputational concerns mounting, brand partnerships and sponsorship opportunities dried up. The family name, once commercially viable for reality TV branding, became a liability in mainstream media spaces. Instead of expansion into new series or spin-offs, the trajectory reversed, toward silence in traditional entertainment channels and avoidance by corporate sponsors. Shift toward social media platforms. As television doors closed, attention shifted online. Individual family members increasingly turned to social media platforms to communicate directly with audiences. But even there, the reception was mixed. Some followers remained supportive, while others engaged critically, analyzing past events, public statements, and perceived inconsistencies. The conversation no longer belonged to producers, it belonged to the internet. Public distrust of the family image. Over time, the Duggar brand experienced a major shift in public perception. Where it once represented stability and tradition to many viewers, it became associated with controversy and unanswered questions. This change did not happen overnight. It developed gradually through repeated media cycles, court coverage, and online discussions that reframed earlier television content through a more critical lens. Rise of true crime-style coverage. One of the most significant transformations was how the story was told. Instead of reality TV recaps, the Duggar narrative increasingly became part of true crime-style commentary. YouTube channels, podcasts, and internet investigators began revisiting timelines, public statements, and archival footage, analyzing them with a focus on accountability, patterns, and context rather than entertainment. This shift fundamentally changed the tone of how the family was discussed online. Key talking points: reality TV decline and network distancing, growth of internet commentary culture, shift from entertainment narrative to investigative analysis, younger family members pursuing separate public identities, ongoing public fascination despite brand collapse, long-term transformation of public perception. The Duggar family once represented one of reality television's most recognizable brands. Now, many people associate the name less with television programming and more with a long-running public controversy that unfolded in real time. Years after their peak television success, discussions surrounding the Duggars continue to generate significant online attention. but the tone has permanently changed. What was once marketed as family entertainment has evolved into a case study, frequently revisited through internet commentary, cultural analysis, and true crime-style storytelling. The controversy surrounding the alleged letters between Anna Duggar and Josh Duggar became yet another heavily debated chapter in a story that continues to draw public attention years later. For some observers, it raised difficult questions about loyalty, faith, and emotional dependence in the middle of a very public scandal. For others, it underscored the darker side of celebrity culture, where online judgment, speculation, and fragmented narratives often collide with private human realities. What's clear is that the Duggar family's story left a lasting mark on reality television history. It reshaped how audiences view public image, morality, and the pressure of maintaining a carefully constructed life under constant scrutiny. And in the end, it serves as a reminder that behind every headline, there are complexities the public may never fully see. With that said, thanks for watching. Until next time.